Hi guys! So today we're going to look at some Canopy functions. You'll remember that Canopy is essentially a framework that's built on top of Selenium. So everything you can do in Selenium you can pretty much do in Canopy as well, but they're just some nice tidy functions that are written on top of Selenium that make it really easy to interact with. So let's go! Okay, so let's have a look at Canopy and some of the main functions that it's got. I'm not going to make this very organized, basically just going to go through it as if it's the first time I'm looking at Canopy. Probably the easiest way really. So this might not be a very elegant video, but let's have a look at the documentation and have a look at some of these functions. So on the Canopy website, you've got the docs section here, and this is kind of the main area you want to be looking at for Canopy. Let's start off with the actions. And here you can see you can start an instance of the browser with the start function. So if we go to our Visual Studio project, which is available in the description, you can see we're already using Start Chrome. So that should just load up a nice instance of Chrome for us. Then we have the URL, which I mentioned in a previous video. You can use this syntax here, but I usually use the URL. So just URL and then the actual string of the URL you want to go to. In this case, we're going to go to the Canopy's own test page, which looks like this, which is kind of just a basic page with various elements on there that you can do stuff with, just as a test, basically. So that's handy to have. So we're going to start Chrome, we're going to go to this URL, and we don't need to worry about this now, but at the end of the test you can actually quit the browser, which is, we'll cover that in later videos really, because that's when you start looking at running tests in parallel and you start looking at running them in a framework and having them close down after each test runs. Not something we have to worry about too much today, although we could probably say at the end, quit browser, and that should probably do it. So after the test, that should shut down on its own when it's finished. Then you've got write, so that will write text to an element. So again, mentioned this in the previous video, but if you've got a test field like this test field 1 here, it currently has a value when you load the page of test value 1. If we go into F12 in the Chrome developer tools and use the element inspector, we can see that this has an ID of test field 1. So we've got the hash there, which denotes an ID, and a test field of 1. So if we do a clear on that first, because if you look on here, there is a clear, so you can clear the text of an element just by using the clear function and specifying the ID. So let's just do that quickly first of all. So we'll say clear, and you've got the double quotes there. So that ID again was test field 1. So first thing we'll do is we'll clear test field 1, and then we'll write a new value into it using the write function from Canopy, which if we refresh the page, have a look again at the top, the write function is just this syntax here with the 2 back arrows. Later on, I actually do this in a different way. I actually use the write keyword instead of the double back arrows. That's because I'm using the parallel functions, but again, we'll go into that in a later video when we start expanding the framework. So for now, we can just say super easy. We're going to say the ID, backspace, backspace, and then what we want to write into it. So there's the function. That's the name of the ID. And I actually forgot to put the hash there because it's an ID. So let's do the same here. Hash test field 1. And we're going to put my input or whatever we want to say there. So that was the first one there. And you've got some other test fields there. We can also do the same with first name, which is actually blank when you load the page. So we don't need to clear that one. We can just put a name in there straight away. So again, let's just take that. And on the next line, we'll do first name. I think it was like that. It's case sensitive, so you need to make sure you get it right. So capital N actually. first name, and put my name in. Okay, and let's go back to Canopy and just have a look down and see what else we can get here. Read is a handy one. So this one reads the text or value of the selected option of an element. So what you can do with that is you can say, for instance, let's have a look on the page and see what we've got here. So if we have a look at Ajax loaded, that's obviously got the text Ajax loaded and it's got an ID of Ajax. So in theory, we should be able to say read Ajax. I think that should work. So if we say get Ajax text, so if you ever want to get the text of an element, you can just use this. So you can use this let binding, which will basically just assign this to this let binding here. So we can call this what we want. This can be called anything. It doesn't matter what it's called, but we can use that in our test plan just to be able to step over it when we're debugging, and we should be able to see that the value of this let binding becomes whatever the text of that is on the page. So we can actually try that now. Actually, let's just run it off and see what we've got so far. So we're going to go right click and we're going to go debug. Let's see how that works. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start Chrome. So F10, Chrome has loaded up. And now we're going to go to the URL for the test page. We're going to clear this field, F10, that's cleared. And we're going to write my input into it up here. Next, we're going to find the field with the ID of first name and we're going to write James into it, which is this field here that we found. So F10 into that one, there it is. And let's see if this one works. So if we press F10, now the value of this let binding, because we said let get Ajax text equals, and we've got this read function, which is Canopy's read function. We've given it an ID, and just from giving it the ID, it's found the element with the ID on there, and it's actually extracted the text. So the text was Ajax loaded. And if you highlight over that let binding, you can actually see we've got that text, Ajax loaded. So that's a really simple, nice way to get some text out from elements. It's really handy, that one. So let's, if we F10 that now, you should see the browser close, hopefully. There you go. So that instance of Chrome has closed and we've now finished that test, and that test has passed. So that's fine. So let's carry on looking at this now and see what else we can check out. So we've got clicks, obviously, which is pretty self-explanatory, and you'll be using those a lot. So let's just go for, let's see what we've got here. There you go, we've got a radio button there, and we can click that one. So that's got an ID of radio 1. So let's do that. So just as simple as going click radio 1. That should click that one and select it for us like that. You've got double clicks as well, which I've never had to actually use, but they could be useful depending on what project you're doing. And the same with control click, shift click, right click. There's loads of stuff you can do in here, and there's already functions sort of available for these straight away, which is really handy. Checking is a really good one. So you can check a checkbox if it's not already checked. But the clever thing about this one is, if you try to check it twice, it won't click it again, which would uncheck it. So it will just make sure that if you're using check or you're using uncheck, it will just make sure it's in that state. So for instance, if we take this checkbox here, I can't say checkbox. If we take this one here, and unsurprisingly, it's got an ID of checkbox. So let's take that one. If I just snap that to the left, it might make it easier to see. Yeah, kind of. There we go. So if we were to say, let's do check and ID of checkbox, that should check it for us. And if I check it again, it shouldn't just toggle it on and off. it should just remain in that state because it knows that we've used the check function. So we want to make sure it's checked and it's actually actively checked. And then we can use uncheck to uncheck it. So we can try that in a moment. You can even do things like dragging. So you can actually drag one item to another, which again, I've not had cause to do this yet, but I mean, that's a really awesome, really powerful thing you can do on here, which I don't even know if that was there in just standard Selenium, but I certainly don't remember seeing it. So there's some really awesome things in Canopy that you can just do with a simple word like drag. That's just all you need to get that to work. Some of these I've never used before because, like I say, I've just never had cause to yet. I just obviously pick up things whenever I feel the need to use them. I'll pick them up and use them in the project at my work. But most of the time, to be honest, it's clicking and it's writing into elements and verifying things and that sort of thing. It actually also has things called unreliable elements. So you can actually get elements without the built-in reliability, which is kind of, I guess, more similar to the original Selenium, where it will just go off and do it and it will throw an exception if you can't find it straight away. Because as I've mentioned before, Canopy basically is a layer on top of the original Selenium, and it kind of adds a stability layer. So it will hang around and it will wait a few seconds and check for things rather than just failing straight away. But if for whatever reason you don't want to have that added stability in there, you can actually use these other functions, which will just check them straight away and throw an exception straight away as well. Let's scroll down and see what else we've got here. You can use things like parent to get the parent element of the provided element as well, so that's quite handy in some instances. Again, I've not really had cause to do that yet, not in the current way that I write my framework, and we'll see as we go through this video course how I personally have written my framework. So let's keep going down. So you can switch to an instance of a browser as well, which is good. I've not had to do that yet. I do switch tabs, which is quite handy because on one of the websites that I test, we actually have a lot of areas where we click on a button and it'll open it up in a new tab like this. And I need to be able to actually specify and tell Canopy to jump between the tabs and then carry on executing the test. So you can easily do that with the switch to tab function. You can just basically specify the number of which tab you want to target, and it should just flip that across automatically. You can close tabs if you so desire. You can run JavaScript in the browser, which is really handy because we've got a website at work which is full of animations, and I usually decide to disable them just at the beginning of the tests just to make them run a lot quicker. I guess some people would say it makes it less accurate of a test, but to be honest, I don't think I've ever had any issue with that. So I usually run a little bit of JavaScript at the beginning of the test just to disable the animations and then carry on with the testing. But that's super easy to do with this JS function here. You can sleep for a specified amount of time in seconds, which is kind of generally considered bad practice in the testing world. Just because when you're waiting for things, ideally you want to wait for a certain condition to happen before you carry on, rather than waiting just an actual solid amount of time, because it's kind of a bit brittle to just wait, you know, X seconds as opposed to wait for an element to become visible and then carrying on. But if you find that you need to do that, because sometimes, to be honest, on some of the projects you work on, you might just find that it's really difficult, and you might just find that you might have a certain use case for it where you can't really get it to work in any other way, in which case I personally think there's not really much harm in that if you just try to keep it to a minimum, basically. You've got press as well. You can simulate a key press, and you can also import openqa.selenium, and you can use other keys in there as well. But this has got all the kind of the basic things here, like pressing tab and up, down, left, right, escape, that sort of thing. But there's various ways to do that. That's sometimes really useful, actually. Sometimes on some of the websites that I've tested before, I find myself having to tab out of a field after I've input something in it. So I might input something into this line, but I might actually write a mini function and wrap it to basically say, every time you write into an input field, we're also going to press tab after it just to tab out of that box and carry on. I've had to do that really for stability's sake, because for some reason on some of the websites I test, it can fall over if you don't do that. So that kind of thing is really easy to do here. Pinning the browser, that's handy, because as you probably see here, when the browser currently first loads up, it actually loads up just in a pinned right position, so it's just half the screen like this, just on the right hand side. But I generally prefer to pin it full screen as soon as the test starts. That can work really easily, and you can just basically load up the browser and then just snap the whole thing full screen, which is handier to see if you want to watch the test as it goes through. That's kind of it for the actions, really. We'll probably save the other areas for a different video. We can have a look through some of these different areas. So that's probably it, I think, for sort of the basic functions there for how to interact with Canopy, with the actions. There is a lot more to it, and again, we'll do that in future episodes as well. Next episode, we'll go through assertions and have a look at those. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later. Cheers.